Annie, hello.
Hi.
Hi. How's things?
Good. Yeah. Busy week. How about you?
Very busy. So I I don't take breaks though, and it's not like a badge of honor. I don't know. The weeks and the weekends sort of blur together. So I don't know.
Mhm.
What is the same for you, or you just do you actually take time to not be
You
obsessed
know,
with work?
I think that living with a partner who has like a normal job, like a in-person job, regiments me a little bit more. And so like I'm at my parents' house right now and I stayed up really late the other night just like working on things. But it's so antisocial for me to like work on the weekends and like late in the evenings when he's around. So I pretty much just follow his work schedule, but he works like 65 hours a week and I
Oh,
don't work that many hours. So it does give me a little bit of flexibility in there to
yeah,
sleep more than him.
that helps. That helps. That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's always a balance. We'll get more into that too in a second. But I guess for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah. So I am Annie Nelson on TikTok. I'm Annie's Analytics. It's kind of my name on all my different platforms, Annie's Analytics. Basically, I used to be a nanny and I got my master's degree in occupational therapy, which I graduated in 2022. And while I was finishing my master's degree, I decided to start learning data analytics as a side hustle because I thought I'd be able to like analyze spreadsheets for like 20 bucks an hour, which was not a good thought. Actually, I actually don't think those positions exist, like as even on Fiverr and stuff, but I thought maybe. So I took the Google Data Analytics certificate and I started a TikTok because I thought if I could do this, like single moms and stuff would really love to know this. And then in a month, I had 10,000 followers on TikTok and people were so invested. And I realized that my original plan wasn't going to work. This was in February of 2022. And then in April of 2022, I was in Austin, Texas, and I had one of the best weeks of my life visiting a friend who lives there. And I was like, if I switch careers to become a data analyst, I could work remotely and then I could do more of this. But if I get an in-person job that has limited PTO, I probably wouldn't be able to visit Austin very often, was the thinking. So I kept going with it. And then in July of 2022, I got my first job in data as a Tableau consultant for a small Tableau consulting organization and kept going with I was going to shut down my social medias, but then
Oh,
I kept getting messages from people saying how helpful it was and how valuable and how they had left their dead end job and doubled their salary and were working from home. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll keep going if it's that helpful. And then I kind of it's kind of evolved into a thing that I think is really good for my career as well as helping other people. And yeah, I'm in my second job as in data now. I got laid off in June of 2023.
mhm.
So then I started in August of 2023 at GitLab, which is not GitHub. Everyone always says, "Oh, I know GitLab," and then they realize they actually know GitHub.
Mm.
But I work at GitLab, and it's great because it's got a great culture, all remote, and so I get to keep traveling. I've been to like New Zealand. I'm going to Costa Rica.
Fun.
Those are kind of that's my kind of thing now. I'm a data analyst and a content creator, and my big things are like data and then also remote work and traveling.
Yeah, I'm looking at your TikTok. You got like 5.5 million views on TikTok. That's
Yeah,
insane.
I have. I mean, yeah, I have two videos that have both crossed the 1 million. I think I've got three
Really?
across the 1 million threshold. I took a video of myself getting laid off, but it wasn't like. Did you see that video of the girl recently who took a video of herself getting laid off?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. While
her.
she's getting laid off, did you do the same thing or was it
Yeah, it was the same thing, but
really?
I didn't record I mean, audio was recorded, but I didn't include the audio in the videos. It was just a video, like just the
Yeah.
visual of me getting like laid off because I knew I was about to get laid off when it happened. And then I voiced over it to kind of just like talk about what it was like to get laid off. So that video I think is at 2 million views now.
Whoa.
Yeah. I
What
don't
was it like? I mean, because you're an OT graduate. My dad's actually, he was an OT for a long time. Um, so I know what that works like. You go, I mean, you literally cannot do the job remote. It would be impossible.
know.
You know, so
Very not fun, at least.
what's that?
very unfun, at least. I did a couple of remote sessions
Okay, yeah,
in the pandemic.
but it would
And
be pretty tricky. Yeah,
oh, it sucked.
yeah, I can't even imagine. My dad used to work with a lot of mentally disabled people, and worked on motor skills and stuff, and it was just a slow process there. But that's a big difference from being an analyst, right? And so then an analyst that blows up on TikTok while you just graduated from OT school. So what was that sort of transition point like? Because I don't think a lot of people do that.
Yeah. Surprisingly, a lot of people, not the TikTok part, but a lot of people actually, the pathway from the health sciences and teaching into analytics is actually pretty strong. A lot of my followers are teachers, actually,
Interesting.
because these people are being so poorly treated, and so they like love being with kids, but then realize that if they get a tech job, they can like get paid a livable wage and like not have to take PTO to go to the doctor. So that's why it resonates with a lot of people, my story. But it's been interesting. I think the weird part was when I was learning data analytics, I realized I hit this kind of like liminal gray space at some point where I was no longer the person that I was before. Like I had kind of quested off and decided I didn't want to work an in-person job, and I had kind of seen the opportunities of a remote, more flexible lifestyle. But I wasn't that person yet, and I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anyone in the industry. Like I didn't know anyone in data. And I didn't like have any connections, any friends, and nobody in my life like knew anything about data. And so there was this weird gray space of like, I'm not who I was, but I'm also not yet who I want to be. I think maybe I was in that space a little bit, but it was like very pronounced for, I'd say, about 4 to 5 months. It feels more normal now, and I've realized that like my background working with people is what makes me a really good analyst. And every time I get like positive comments from my boss or people at my job or people on LinkedIn about like basically being good at data, it's always a reflection of the people skills that I built before.
That's really fascinating. Walk me through that. Why are you so good with people, and how does that translate over to being a good analyst?
Yeah, I've always been really interested in psychology, and I really like to unpack people. Like my friends all come to me as their like relationship counselor, and I've had jobs where like every new hire, like I like would sit on interviews and stuff and meet new hires, because then I could like give kind of a download of like my perceptions of the person and stuff. So this is something that's always been really fascinating to me. And I just kind of, as a nanny, I worked with like multiple families usually at a time. So I was managing that schedule. And then usually the families have multiple kids. So like I had one family with like a newborn, and then a 3-year-old, and then a 5-year-old. And like managing their needs all at the same time and keeping them occupied and on the track their parents want them to be is not all that different from working with stakeholders. Not to like infantilize the stakeholders, but it's just like I actually don't like the way that a lot of times people in data will like really look down on their stakeholders. Like, oh yeah, we are babysitting our stakeholders and they're so dumb. Well, like, I'm not saying it that way because I don't agree with that. It's just that like, it's not their job to be a data analyst. And so I
Right.
have to obviously take my job down to the lowest notch because it's not their job to do my job. But they each have kind of these competing priorities, and I need to like check in with them and manage them and like give them things in the style that they need. Like sometimes it needs to be a sync. Sometimes they actually would rather review a video. Sometimes they want to comment on an issue, which is we use GitLab for all of our project management. And so knowing that kind of different styles and being able to like check in with people is really valuable to being able to kind of get things done, because most data projects, it's not just like, I need you to make this data model. It's like, I need you to make this data model in consideration with like all of these other things.
Why do you think that some analysts view their stakeholders the way you described?
It's a good question. I hear this from not just analysts. I hear this from like universally data people.
Mm.
And I wonder if sometimes business users feel the same way about us, like if, oh, they're so dumb. Why can't they just understand this sales concept or whatever? I don't know. But I think it's just because, and I definitely have like fallen for this before, essentially. It just seems so simple. Like the things that I'm asking from them, or the things that they're like, they'll come to me and they'll be like, okay, these are the things I want out of this project. And it's like, you don't have any of this data. None of those questions that you want make sense. And you don't actually want this. This is what you actually want. And it's like this curse of knowledge of like, all of these things, whereas they just have so much less like context already built up around things. And so what they're really asking you, they haven't sat down and thought about the whole data landscape. What they're really asking you is like, I need you to solve this problem for me.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to translate that because that's our job. But it feels very like simple and like, well, why can't you, it's very like simple and small-minded of you. And actually, I see this the most, and you can tell me if you see this the most. I actually see it the most in people talking about executives. Have you seen that?
I see this, I would say universally, not just data people, but I think that if you're not an executive, then you sort of feel executives are, sort of out of touch, maybe, right? It seems to be the perception at least a lot of the comments. And I think that, and a lot of the executives, I think, they might feel maybe the same way about the people that they are accountable to, that they manage and oversee. So yeah, I think it's a sort of like this universal loathing across the board, where if like you're not one of us, then you're one of them, and I'll probably find some way to find fault with you, right? So I have noticed this with data people. I've noticed it with the people who deal with data people. I've noticed it with engineers, and execs. Like why can't the execs just seem to make up their mind about what they want? Why do requirements keep changing all the time? Do they not understand what we do? Right. So yes, I do see this. I wish it wasn't the case, but because it causes a lot of tribalism. But so it is. you know what I mean? It's a yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, one of my clients, I felt like it's a breath of fresh air because the CEO knew exactly what all the problems were with data. And when I talked to individual contributors to the T, they echoed exactly what the CEO saw.
Wow.
So I think that was a very enlightened and I think very I think that CEO in particular was paying attention. So, but I don't know that that's always the case.
Yeah. And do they like, also the question is like, should they be paying attention to that level of granularity, or is it like, have they hired the right managers and VPs and stuff to then delegate that down? Because I'm used to obviously a very small ecosystem, like with being a nanny and stuff. But when the ecosystem is a lot larger, I've started talking to more. When I was a consultant, I worked with a lot of small companies, and then now GitLab is like 2,000 people and publicly traded. And so I had done like a CFO shadow program, and I have been to a lot of like our earnings calls and stuff with analysts where I just listen in on that. And it's like, okay, I understand why you have no idea what I'm talking about, because it's just not a good use of your time. Like they have, like the CFO, for example, has to have like a lot of his job is around being the CFO of a public company, and he has to report out to analysts and answer all the investor calls and everything. And it's not that he doesn't understand any of the granular stuff, it just wouldn't make sense for him to concern himself with the details of my job,
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're talking about analytics, because there's, I mean, that can go that means a lot of different things, I think, to a lot of different people in a lot of different companies.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect the executives to know all the various statistical methods of analyzing data and so forth. It'd be pretty sick if they did. But, I mean, I think the most impressive person I've ever seen is Warren Buffett. Like you can sit in a meeting with him and he will literally spout off numbers and calculate probabilities in his head. And he knows his numbers for every operational unit of his business, Berkshire Hathaway. And there's like 300, 400,000 employees there. But he knows every number to the T. But that's rare, right?
Yeah.
And he's also got like an IQ of 160. So, but that's the only time I've seen somebody who had just, I would say, the deepest fundamental level of understanding of their business. But I don't think that's the case. And I don't think that's an expectation. Most executives, I don't think operate at that level, right? But I have seen it. But to your point, it's I wouldn't expect them to be able to go do your job, for example. That'd be weird.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And then, so I mean, yeah, you're an analyst. You work with stakeholders. You might be sort of this stakeholder whisperer, so to speak, because you're this clairvoyance or whatever you have with understanding people. I mean, walk me through how that translates into being a better analyst.
Yeah, I think that it's the ability. I think it saves a lot of time and it allows me to focus in the right places.
Mm.
And so, and it allows me to be more of a manager of one, manage myself, because so I started at my company in mid-August, and I have a great manager and just kind of team that I belong to, and they put me. I'm only like now a year and a half into the field, but they put me on some fairly like high visibility projects, but making these like dashboards that the CFO and people would be seeing. That's kind of what led me down that route of thinking about those things. And I got to just kind of manage that myself. And I've essentially like taken data product ownership of it.
Nice.
And so I'm working with the stakeholders directly to get things reviewed. So initially I kind of needed support from my boss of like knowing who to talk to and everything. But I feel now like I finally have the hang of it. And so I can meet directly with the leaders of the different teams to get review approval and ask them about anything from like how we're calculating the numbers in DBT in the back end versus how they want to see it on the front end and what filters and everything and the overall, and being able to take ownership of the whole process, I think is, and I don't want to like sound full of myself, but I think it's pretty unusual for this stage of career. Because a lot of people I know who are at my level, like who have been in the field for about as long as I do, I haven't heard them talking about anything along the lines of data product ownership.
Yeah.
So
no, I think at that stage, most analysts I think are just finally getting over a lot of the tactical stuff, right? By that I mean, especially when you come out of like an analytics training or whatever. Back when I got started, there really wasn't a thing like that, but I've seen them, and so But I think you're interested in applying the methods, right? I want to try these algorithms out. I want to try these approaches out, and I think after about a year and a half, you become attuned to actually probably start answering business questions like for real. But it takes I think a level of maturity, and it doesn't happen overnight. I don't think. Like a person like you is a rare exception where you just kind of have this like EQ where you can just sort of figure it out. But that's abnormal.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're abnormal in a bad way, but maybe you are. I don't know. But
I think those things can swim in. I think I've been able to kind of swim in parallel on those things. Like I've been able to build my stakeholder management skills, which is new for me, like in the corporate setting. Fortunately, GitLab is really good about like short toes, and like I feel like I can message like the VP of sales or whatever to ask them questions. I usually go through someone else, but like I don't feel like there's this hierarchy that I can't even talk to or even look at someone above me, which has been very helpful. But I think I've been able to develop the stakeholder management alongside kind of all the technical things because I already have such a foundation of working with people and managing stakeholders that it just kind of naturally comes in with it. And I also got really, really good training using Tableau at my last job. My last boss was phenomenal. And honestly, the company that hired me initially probably shouldn't have hired anybody on my team because they like had this idea that they were going to build this Tableau team from start, like from entry level people. And then they like got rid of the like VP who was responsible for bringing a lot of that business in, and like Tableau stopped sending them business as a partner. So the amount of work that my team had to do like went down dramatically, but that gave my boss more time to really like dive deep on training us on like really being good consultants in Tableau. And him and I are still really good friends. Like I call him all the time to like rubber down with him on things because I don't really have anyone else at my company who's like doing Tableau like how I am. So that was really helpful to have a really solid technical foundation in Tableau and then also have a really technical people skills foundation in stakeholder management. And so I got to just kind of do those together.
That's super cool. And sort of connects us to the book you wrote. So along the way, recently you published a book. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So in January of 2023, a publisher at Wiley reached out and said, "Hey, I think you've got a really incredible story, and I'd love for Wiley to be the one to publish it." And I was like, "Okay, this is interesting," but like I've looked at a bunch of Wiley books. Some of the books I really like in data are Wiley, and they're all very technical, like more like technical manuals. And
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think that I can like write a technical manual about becoming a data analyst, because I think the whole value that I bring to it is like my story. And like I shared on my TikTok as I was going through it about how like my apartment was a mess because I was job searching while also doing this internship full time, and I was exhausted, and I like hadn't gone for even a mental health walk in weeks, and I was having a terrible time, and I almost gave up trying to become a data analyst because I thought it was impossible because no one would hire me. So I shared all that stuff, and I said I think that stuff is really valuable, and so I don't think I could do it without that. And they're like, no, this is your story, like however you want to tell it, we want you to tell it how you want to tell it. I was like, okay. And they also said like they would pay me upfront instead of like some companies, I think like Pact, you only get paid if you get sales, but they're like, no, we'll pay you a good amount of change upfront to write the book. And I was like, okay, but I'm going to New Zealand for 6 weeks in February. And so I need to do it after that. And they're like, cool. So I came back in March. And the really cool thing about writing the book that I don't know if I've mentioned this on my LinkedIn or not yet, but the writing of the book ended up being very in parallel to my life. Like it could have been like the plot of like a science fiction movie. Basically, 1 year after starting to learn data analytics is when I started writing the book. So right in that space of writing section 1 about like learning, taking courses and stuff was just as I was like really reflecting on the past year of having done that. And then I started to look for a new job because things in my last job were not going great. And just as I started like building my portfolio is when I finished the first section and got into the second section, which is all about portfolios. So as I was writing the whole section, I actually did a portfolio project for the book that showed like essentially an example of like different levels of Tableau projects, like what you could expect out of a first project, beginner, intermediate, and regular user. And that was a lot of work. And I just put that into my actual portfolio, like for job searching. And it actually brought me in 3 leads for potential new jobs. And also I wrote it for the book. I did it for the book, which was really cool.
Wow.
And then as the day that I finished the portfolio section and moved into section 3, like job searching and resumes and stuff, I got laid off. Crazy, right?
It is like out of a movie.
Yeah. So, and then I wrote that while I was kind of I had already started job searching also at that point.
Yeah.
And then I decided to add a 4th section about like preparing for a layoff and how to start a new job, like how to like overcome imposter syndrome and succeed in your first 90 days and stuff. And it was just as I was just about to get hired and like shifting gears into thinking about that. And so it walked with me in my life for like months.
Interesting. So walk me through this, because it seemed like you were sort of writing a biography or autobiography at the same time as you were writing your book. How did you translate those experiences into something that would be kind of, I guess, more advice for analysts without having to, I guess, go on the spectrum of venting?
Yeah. I actually have definitely learned to flex the skill of sharing, not venting on my social media, because a lot of people, I'm sure you've seen this on LinkedIn, people will go on and be like, the job market is terrible. No one's hiring me.
I've never seen that at all. I'm just kidding. It's like every post.
It's like, that's not going to get you hired, buddy. So I
or trashing your employer. That's the other one I see a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So that I had already kind of gotten flexed the skill, learned that skill there. But I don't know, it was pretty natural, actually. I basically, it mirrored a lot of the way that I think. A lot of times I think, I think a lot of analogies, I see a lot of connections. And so essentially, like I would share like a piece, let's say, for example, a piece of my journey, like how, I would say, okay, in this section, I want to write about optimizing your LinkedIn. And then I would maybe share like my experience with optimizing my LinkedIn. And then I would share the tips that I learned from that I think that you should reproduce or definitely stay away from when you do it. And then I tried to link to resources, especially on anything like career stuff. Like I'm not a career coach. So I tried to link out to as many resources as I could.
Yeah.
So it kind of just went back and forth like that. Sometimes I would start with the practical, here's what I learned about this thing, and then go into the story. There was one chapter, building a portfolio. I think it was like chapter 7, which was pretty much all technical. Like I had some actual sample portfolio projects that I'd put in there. And then there was 2 chapters, which were pretty much entirely narrative, not technical at all. One of them was what it felt like to job search. And then I think the other one was, it was either what it felt like to get laid off, or there was something. I feel like there was 2 of them, but I know that I definitely dedicated a whole chapter to just like how difficult job searching was emotionally.
Wow. I mean, so the book's like How to Become a Data Analyst, right?
Yes.
Is this geared towards like your first job or your second job as a data analyst when you was your first one, or like at what stage in your career would you want to read this?
Yeah, first job. It's you're supposed to be able to pick it up and be able to, like, as long as you read from the beginning, be able to understand anything that you see in there. So there shouldn't be anything that requires any kind of background knowledge. And again, like I said, I kind of point out a lot of places where it's like, and then I don't teach data analytics in the book. Like I'm not telling anybody how to use the sum function in SQL. Essentially, like it's like how to pick a good course. You should be looking for courses that have this, and you shouldn't be learning Java in order to become a data analyst. And how do I know I've got enough portfolio projects in my portfolio to then go and apply for jobs? And just kind of my thinking on it. And I try and present a spectrum because there's so many opinions on the internet. So I try and kind of present the spectrum of them. Some people think that you should never have a Titanic data set in your portfolio because it's a very used data set. Some people think that it's a great starting point. And so I tried to say, here's the different opinions that I've come across. Here's what worked for me. Here's the resources that I like. Do with that what you may.
You mentioned that the internet's full of advice on becoming a data analyst. I mean, it's full of advice on everything you can think of practically. What's some of the worst advice you've seen for becoming a data analyst?
Well, I think that surprisingly, like I think that there's 2 different schools of thought. There's people who know a lot. Okay, there's 3 different schools of thought. There's people who are just shooting their mouth off, who you shouldn't listen to, who just say dumb things. There's people who are like very much like me, like essentially me, but then they create a course or a boot camp or whatever because they got a job or 2 in the industry and think that just translates. And then there's people who are like really experienced. And from the second 2, I actually see questionable things from both of them. People who just got into the field recently and managed to get a job or 2 tend to be fairly like absolutist in saying like, they boil analytics down a lot. They say they say like, okay, all I needed was 4 portfolio projects and the Google certificates course, and I got a job. So that's all you need to get a job as a data analyst, which I think could be true, but also there's a lot of things that people aren't considering. And I see like also a lot of them are content creators and maybe comfortable in front of a camera. And so they'll give this advice of like, oh, just build yourself a brand, make some portfolio projects, and you'll get a job.
Yeah.
It's just not true. I've had a bunch of coffee chats with people who are trying to get into data and they're so awkward on camera. Like they're not building themselves a brand like how you are, like not you particularly, but those people. So I think that could be good advice, but it's way too narrow. But then on the other side, of it, there's people who are super, super experienced who some people give almost like aggressive advice. They're like, everything in your portfolio must be amazing. And you have to learn Python right away because you're going to need to know it as a senior data analyst and above. And it's like, okay, well, I became a data analyst I did learn Python, but I didn't need to. It wasn't valuable to me in my job applications. No one cared that I had taken a Python course. So again, that's like I think that's too intense to be like, all the way that direction. And I think that's kind of the 2 categories of bad advice I see the most out there.
but I mean, it's easier than ever, I would say, right? To have, because everyone has a voice now, or
Mhm.
at least the ability to maybe have a voice. I still think that it's one to have a voice; it's another to be listened to.
Yeah. Well, also being listened to a lot of times comes with, how pretty your face is. I mean, LinkedIn has tried in
Yeah.
10 different ways to stop people from just posting selfies and succeeding, but the chances that a pretty girl is going to have a selfie do really well is almost impossible to solve for, because
Yeah.
it's just how the internet works. I'm not saying that, obviously, I'm not saying that pretty girls are dumb. I'm just saying that your ability to be heard is not usually or always tied to the merit of what you're saying.
Oh yeah, I've seen this a lot. I mean, I'm not on TikTok. I'm on Instagram, and I see these some data influencers, and I would say objectively very attractive people. But I listen to the advice, and I'm like, I don't know who this is for. It just seems very kind of empty advice.
Mhm.
But they got a big following, and more power to them. I mean, I have nothing going my direction in terms of being a putting beautiful selfies on the internet, so I don't need to worry about that. I think I got to where I am through hopefully having substantive conversations and maybe being a bit of a dork along the way. But so I mean, there's more than one way. You could be a curmudgeonly old guy like me, and also I think finally get ahead in this game too. But I think at the end of the day, I think it would seem like people would see through a lot of the kind of shallow advice and hopefully gravitate towards people like yourself who are probably providing a bit more. I wouldn't say a bit more, but a lot more meaningful and tangible advice. And what separates what I think what you're doing too is you actually took the time to write a book, which is not the easiest thing in the universe to do. It's certainly not as easy as making videos or putting selfies online. That was a lot of work. I mean, the thing I like to ask writers is like, why do you do this to yourself? You have a million other things to do. I mean, you got a lot of hobbies, and book's a lot of work. Why?
Yeah. I initially just wanted to just write a series of blogs. My initial, right around the same time Wiley reached out to me, I was thinking, okay, I've got a lot of content out there in a lot of places, and a lot of people ask me about it. And I want to be able to have like a concise reference where if somebody wants to know what I have to say about tech interviews, they know how
Mm,
to find that. And especially on TikTok, I mean, everywhere, and LinkedIn, that's pretty tough to do. And so I was thinking about maybe like making YouTube videos or like a series of blogs. Um, I do well on TikTok, but I actually personally don't watch YouTube very often because I'm much more of a reader than a listener. So I was a little bit hesitant about creating content that I wouldn't be personally consuming. So I thought about maybe like a series of blogs, and then Wiley reached out, and I was like, okay, so this would be an opportunity for me to work with like a well-known publisher who's really respected. I would have an editor. They would pay me up front, and then I'd have a physically printed book. And even if it doesn't sell anything, I think that's pretty cool.
mhm.
Not even for the money of it. I just think being able to say that I published a book with Wiley would be like a really cool thing for me, and getting to work with a
Yeah,
professional editor, especially so early on in my career, like writing a book about data a year into being a data analyst. I was like, heck yeah, that's really cool. So for me, it was just like, this will be a really cool experience. And the content existed almost entirely in my head already. So it was just about getting it out. But I'm not now considering myself a writer and on to the next book. If I have something to say, I'll say it. But for now, I don't have any other books lined up.
I mean, would you write another one if you had something to say?
I would if I felt like I had enough content to make into a book, but I don't know if I think that I don't know. I think hopefully as I move forward. Okay, also, I wrote that book in the hopes that I can not be that person forever. So I think that there is a
Mm,
really big market for that, like break into data market. And now that I have a book in it, I could probably totally release a course, and I could, just talk all the time on my social media about
yeah,
audience. And I could probably eventually quit my job and make more money doing that than I, at least for now, am making as a data analyst. But I don't want to be that person. So for me, the book was like, okay, you want to know about how I got into data? Here we go. I wrote a
yeah.
book read the book. Now I'm ready to move on and talk about other things that I'm interested in right now, which is like the next stuff. Like we were just talking about stakeholders and stuff, way more
I was
interesting.
about to say, I think that would be an interesting book for you to write. I mean, because I think you're coming from a perspective of somebody who's, like I said, seems to have a lot better EQ and is, maybe kind of reminded me of my kid Milo, actually, a bit of an empath, I would say, in that regard, but just more socially aware. And I mean, that would be a great book to read. I think that, my vote is you should do that, but I know it's a lot of work. So, but no, I mean, you don't want to be pigeonholed into I think it's a weird one where you could be become a data analyst person, but then at some point you become detached from that reality too.
Yeah.
Right. Like you aren't, unless you're like trying to find your first job every day, this isn't really your life. At some point you've moved on. It would be like, if I wrote a book on how to become a data engineer, it'd be the dumbest book ever. I haven't applied for a job in I don't even know how long.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
I haven't had a job for a long time either, in the sense where I work for somebody. So it's like that would be a very disingenuous book to write. The advice would be terrible.
Yeah.
What do you say? Like, go build your network and make friends with the executives and all this stuff. It's like it's not advice. I mean,
yeah.
So, and you're going to reach that stage too really soon where you just outgrow that idea. I mean, it's good you wrote that book as a sort of a milestone of where you were, but that's already in the past. So.
Yeah. So I get to kind of think about the next things for me. I'm like, I'm not inherently a content creator because I want to be a content creator. I think it's really good for my career.
Says the person with like a giant TikTok viewership. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But I think it's really good for something that I really enjoy about it is that I get to just talk about my life and then it like helps other people. And like, I'm a verbal processor, which is funny because I learn by reading, but I process by speaking. And so it's kind of just like a video diary for me. It's just like a therapy, like it's just how I can just talk about my life most of the time. But a lot of other content creators who got into it around the same time as me are now going down the road of sponsored posts and making a pretty sizable income off of it. And again, that's just not me. So I think I just been leaving my options open for the future to like let myself go where I want to go, let my brand go where I want to go, because I just can't ever see myself being the person that's going to promote sponsored products that I don't use.
I know what you mean. I'm much the same way. I've done a few of them and I felt kind of weird about it. I actually did one this morning for my friend Matt Harris, and he just launched his book, Effective Pandas 2, and he's a friend. I'll help him out with that. That's another thing. But I think sort of the gratuitous sponsored post stuff, it's especially if you don't even know the product or use it, it seems a bit weird. So yeah, I totally agree. And the thing is, there's good money in it if you wanted to go that route. But I was actually talking with who is it, Jordan Morrow, yesterday. If you know who he is, we're having lunch. We're talking about influencer stuff and just kind of how it's a double-edged sword where the money's good and it's immediate, but I think the problem is depending on your goals, it could have reputational effects on you down the road. And so it's something that, I just tend to avoid unless it's a company that I actually like. And then we try and figure out, interesting ways to do it. Our friend Carly, I like what she does because she's just completely unhinged anyway. Yeah. So she has pretty hilarious posts. So, so if I were to do posts, it would be along Carly. I mean, Carly and I think we always joke we're basically the same person personality wise. We just happen to be, I'm older, a different gender, but we're literally the same person. So
you're a bit more hinged online than Carly is as well.
True. Yes. She is insane, but in the best way possible. Love you, Carly. But yeah, I mean, different strokes for different folks, right? But it's it is a balance for sure.
Yeah, I agree with the reputational stuff. I was thinking about it the other day, and I know that my boss and my boss's boss, and then 2 levels up from that, see my posts on LinkedIn. I'm not going to say that they read every one of my posts, but I know that they see them. And I think that, like, I had one time in a one-on-one with my boss's boss, and he was like, yeah, I saw you posted this thing you posted on LinkedIn the other day. Like, totally agree. I think that was really insightful. I think it was, I don't even remember what it was about, honestly. but I'm building a brand and a reputation from talking about things that I think are real and that matter to me.
Yeah.
And you said earlier that you think people would see through the more shallow content and go to the more substantive content. I actually think it's the opposite.
Interesting.
Because of the way that algorithms work. I think
That's true.
if I were to post, videos of myself with the 5 functions you need to know in SQL to become a data analyst, and post all my adventures in the background, all my remote work adventures, because I've worked from all kinds of cool places. I actually think those would do much.
Yeah, you're right. It would kill.
But I would probably lose the at least reading of, I don't think that my boss and everyone would read my posts anymore if I was posting about those things. So they don't care. But I think that I would actually not be attracting potential bosses in the future. Like, they wouldn't follow me because they don't care about those things, that's sponsored posts. They would see that right away and be like, yeah, I don't want to follow that person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, content's a weird game, right? Like, I'm going to be doing a lot more video this year, but I'm always trying to think of a different approach too, and it's probably going to be the unpopular one, right? I mean, I travel enough; I could make a whole lifestyle vlog if I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ever do that. I mean, my Instagram stories are just like ridiculous half the time; they're just really stupid, because I just don't care about that kind of stuff, right? I mean, and the thing is, you and I are probably both leaving a lot of potential influencer opportunities on the table. But I think if you take a look at the bigger picture and sort of the long game of it, at the end of the day, substance does win out and quality does win out over time. So I think it just depends on like, what is your objective?
Mm-hmm.
To what I do, it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
But I just, which also means I'm working like every waking hour, but that's a different subject. But at the same time, it's like I literally was at the climbing gym this morning and like working on a course.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in between kilter board sessions.
Yes.
So yeah, but it's just like that. But it doesn't feel like work. But I think but I don't know about you, but for me, it feels like the persona that I put into my stuff is like very genuine. There's not a wall, or there's not a facade between the two. Like, it literally is the same person. Is that how you approach things too?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the most, when people say to me that they love my content, genuine and authentic are 2 of the words that I hear the most. And I admittedly think I'm one of the only people I know who really, really enjoys their job. I think a lot of people who say that they enjoy their job don't, not like I do, at least.
Right.
So it's really nice for me to be able to kind of just naturally just love my job and talk about loving my job. And when I talk about frustrations at my job, things that I've hit that are hard, it's me naturally working through them rather than having to like conceal all of the other stuff. Oh yeah, I'm actually just taking screenshots of Excel and putting them to PowerPoints for other people to present. If that's what my job was, I would have a very hard time talking about my job at all on the internet because I'm a bad liar.
In the same way. Oh, that's interesting. So you also climb.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's one thing we I think we talked about a bit. What do you like about rock climbing?
Probably the same stuff I like about data. I like the problem solving. I think it's funny. Us talking about climbing was like, I think the first thing that we ended up talking about outside of like a shared group chat with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to someone the other day and they're like, how do you know Joe Reese? I was like, oh, well, we talk about climbing.
Oh, that's funny.
But I like the problem solving of it, and that, I do this. So I have found that when I'm working on a new concept in my brain, like the first time I had to think about data modeling at different levels of granularity, that was hard to get my brain around because I had to kind of learn that one on the fly. I went to the gym afterwards and I was lead climbing. So I'm like belaying. And so belaying is when I'm not doing anything actively. And it was ticking away in the back of my brain. I didn't even realize it. And then all of a sudden, like my climber was almost near the top of the route. And I like audibly like gasped out loud. And someone next to me was like, are you okay? I was like, I'm sorry. I got it. I understood that the tables were not at the same granularity. And that's why we were having a hard time. And it wasn't that they were not the same granularity. They weren't the same shape. And so I realized that it needed to be, I think, unpivoted in order for us to put them together. And it like clicked. So
for the audience, belaying is when you're holding the rope for the person who's climbing.
Yeah.
So Annie was holding the rope for the person climbing, and then had an epiphany.
Yeah.
Was the person leading or were they on top rope?
Leading, yeah, it was
Oh,
my
great.
yeah. Sometimes he'll come down from climbs and he'll look at me and he'll be like, "Are you thinking about work stuff?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, but I figured it out."
Oh boy. Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, yeah, belaying's one of those things where you kind of go on autopilot after a while, so you can do it, but it's actually the worst thing to go on autopilot with, for very obvious reasons.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
but
indoor playing is
indoors fine. Although I notice these days in climbing, people will fall. They fall a lot farther than they used to.
because the ropes are more dynamic, maybe.
Maybe the ropes, but I think the slack is a lot more for whatever reason. Like we used to be a
Yeah.
bit more conservative, and
Mhm.
now like I saw somebody take like a 50-foot whipper the other day, like, and they were only like probably 3 feet above the rope over
Wow.
the bolt.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know how that happens. It's weird.
Yeah.
But
I see a lot of
anyway,
that belaying. I used to be an instructor. I used to be a climbing coach. Used to be an instructor at a climbing gym. So I just have this just heightened pattern recognition for when people are belaying wrong. I can't even not.
same.
And I actually watched a really interesting video the other day where this guy used a force monitor thing and then went outside and tested a bunch of different lead falls to kind of test like the optimal catch, so that when you catch somebody when they fall, you want to kind of like give them a soft catch and so they don't slam into the wall. It was really interesting. He was doing all the force monitoring and like based on where the person holding the rope was standing, if they were standing really far back or really close, whether they jumped, whether they didn't jump. And it reinforced my belief that so many people at the gym are just doing such a bad job because they stand like kind of perpendicular to the wall, straight back out from it. And like if you know anything about physics, that's the worst place that you could stand, because then when your climber falls, you're going to get sucked into the wall, and then
Oh yeah.
when you hit the wall, it's going to be a hard hit for both you and your climber. So I think that's a contributor. And then a lot of times they do that, and then their slack is touching the ground. So the rope
Yep,
between
it's a
them and
big
the
one.
wall is touching the ground, and so then the person's going to they're going to fall 50 feet.
It's a
That's
huge fall. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Belaying's changed. I actually failed my first belay test. I've been climbing almost 30 years.
Yeah.
It was funny because at the gym, the belaying's different now. I think Alex Honnold, he also failed his belay test at the same gym, which is kind of funny. And a bunch of other old school climbers like myself, but it was it's different now. Climbing's changed, but it's still a lot of fun. I do it all the time. Yeah, you have to get out to Utah sometime.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah.
It's definitely on my list. I actually suggested it. My boyfriend and I want to take off most of August. Well, he would take off most of August. I would work remotely to go on a climbing trip somewhere in the world. But it looks like maybe Utah is going to be pretty hot in August.
It's hot. I would say like September's good.
Mm-hmm.
August, Wyoming would be good in August.
That's where I want to go.
Yeah. It's like Wild Iris and Ten Sleep are both really good.
Mm-hmm.
Ten Sleep's good. It's a bit remote, but
it's very remote.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking about actually driving all the way out to Ten Sleep so that we could have the car, because renting a car is.
Oh, you don't want to rent a car out there. It's literally in the boondocks. Like I grew up in Wyoming. Like everything's far. I grew up in Lander. So
cool.
yeah. So the audience, Lander, Wyoming is now it's like a climbing mecca, but it used to be a rundown cowboy and mining town I grew up in. So what was interesting is seeing climbing like kind of start, at least get popular there. And then Ten Sleep, I remember that was I remember going there, it was brand new.
Oh my gosh.
Actually, yeah, there's like nobody there. Now it's a huge place. So yeah, hit me up if you're in the area. I'd love to go climb and
one of my big
we can give each other terrible belays. It'd be great. So
stand pretty far back from the wall. One of my big goals in life. So my life has just been going so well for the last couple of years. Like I'm almost a little bit suspicious about it, because like how is it going so well? But I think that my like next big goal is to find other people who like work remotely and can, like, I love to travel. One of the reasons I switched careers. And I have not yet. I know you're traveling all the time. I should just come with you.
I do it for work though.
Yeah.
I mean, you're
I
welcome to
should come with
join.
you, tag along. But
Yeah.
my big goal in life is to like be able to find other people who want to travel and work remotely with me. And then also ideally people who would like to rock climb and
Mhm.
travel and work remotely, because then we can go to like the Verdun Gorge. We could go to Spain and like, you know, get a house together and climb and everything. Oh, that would be so cool.
That
But
would be
I
cool.
don't have that at all. So I
Oh,
should.
it's funny because like my good friend Justin Wood, who really really good climber in the States, but he's going to be in Fontainebleau
Mm,
for all of March, and he's messaging me, and I'll actually be there in France, I think twice in March.
mm.
But it's just like the he's like, oh, we should meet up, and I'm like, yeah, I won't be going to Font. I mean, I'm going to be in the city the whole time, which is been unfortunate because my younger self had been in Font the whole time.
Yep.
Not even going to any meetings because I was just I traveled